today. So just to bring ourselves up to date in the last couple of slides, we had elections in the Kurdistan region last year. So we have a new government, a new cabinet in place. It's a new generation, younger generation, and we have a very robust reform agenda to stamp out corruption, to restructure the government, to make it more efficient, to deliver services better to the population, for example, by digitizing many things. I'm sure here in America, you can renew your driving license more or less online. We want to be able to do that, to make it easier for our public. So this is a new, very exciting new cabinet for us, a lot of new faces, new ideas. And our Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister speak fluent English, perfect English. The Prime Minister was educated in America. He was educated at the American University in Washington. And the Deputy Prime Minister, his wife is American, and he was the representative in Washington. So they both have very strong connections with America, and I'm sure determined to continue that strong relationship that we have together. As for our relationship with the United States, I hope in my presentation I've explained that we've had a very good relationship with the United States. At key turning points in our recent history, America has stepped in to support us and to assist us, and we're very grateful to that. For that. Today what we're trying to do is really to widen the relationship. The security partnership is crucial for us, and I think to some extent for the US. So we need to maintain that and strengthen it, and the DoD, I think, would agree with what I'm saying. But we also want to widen it. We want to have much more commercial interaction, economic ties, cultural ties, links with American universities, have exchange programs. I know the World Affairs Council organizes trips abroad. I invite you to come to Kurdistan. It's safe, it's beautiful, and Americans are loved. And so I will end with a few pictures of Kurdistan for those of you who haven't seen it. I recommend you look at the internet and see. So these gentlemen are in traditional clothing, so it's baggy pants with a cummerbund and a turban. And these are some of the women, a dance group. This is a picture of our capital, Erbil. There are many things that would be familiar to you, hotels. I think there's Hertz car hire now. There's a Coca-Cola factory and a Pepsi factory. So, and Kurdistan is famous for pomegranates. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Mic's working now. We have a lot of questions here. We'll see if we can combine them in some way and ask for your response. Let me start with two that are culturally related. What is the origination of the word or the cultural concept of Kurds? Where did they come from in early history? What religion or religious or old tribal form were they? And also, very specifically, outside of that, are the Yazidis Christians? If you can kind of just address all those questions.
I'm sorry, what was the last about
Are the Yazidis?
Yazidis?
Yeah, are they Christians? You can start with that if you like.
Yazidis are not Christian. It's a unique religion that goes back thousands of years. There are Yazidis in Iraq, or we would call it Kurdistan because it's the disputed territories. And in places like Armenia, in Syria, a few places like that. Some people say that their religion is very close to Zoroastrianism, but it's a unique religion. There are some elements that are would be familiar to Jews, Christians, and Muslims, and then there are other elements that are very different. Unfortunately, the Yazidis have been persecuted for many, many years. Sometimes they've been described as devil worshippers, and they're not. They believe in God. And they have unique customs and a unique culture. And we in Kurdistan want to do our best to preserve Yazidism and to protect their rights in Kurdistan and in Iraq. As for the Kurds, in terms of history and culture, so our ancestors would have been the Medes, and as you know, the Medes and the Persians merged their empires, so the Persian Empire could arguably be also partly Kurdish. The Kurds have been in that part of the world for thousands of years. The language is Indo-European and is closest to Farsi or Persian. It's the same family as Persian, but it is a distinct language. In ancient times, the Kurds were Zoroastrian, and then Jewish, and then Christian, and then Muslim. Today, the majority of Kurds around the world are Sunni Muslim, but we do have a Shia minority, Christians, Yazidis, Shabaks, Kakis, others, lots of small groups as well. And we're very proud of that history, we're very proud of the diversity that we have today. And one of the things, for example, we insist on is that our government should be called the Kurdistan Regional Government, not the Kurdish Regional Government, because not everybody in Kurdistan is Kurdish. So sometimes people argue about that, where they say we're making a different statement, but we're not. That's why we say Kurdistan, because you can be Turkoman, which is a unique identity, a different identity.
Thank you. Several questions here, all related. As you noted when you began speaking, the largest single aggregation of Kurdish people, if I may say it that way, is in Turkey by far, the largest number. You've not spoken too much about that. What is the situation with the Kurds in Turkey? Similarly put, the Kurds that are located in Turkey, how is the Erdogan government treating them? And then finally, how does the U.S. bring friendly, quote unquote, being friendly with both Turkey and the Kurdish people affect Kurdistan?
Okay. Well, as you said, Turkey has the largest Kurdish population. Unfortunately, after the formation of the Turkish state in the early 20th century, there was a policy of denying the Kurdish existence. So you couldn't say Kurd, you couldn't say Kurdistan, and Kurds were described as mountain Turks. And there was a campaign of killing of Kurdish leaders, of the Kurdish middle class, and very, very repressive. In more recent times, under President Erdogan at the time, I think when he first became Prime Minister, so that would have been perhaps 18, 19 years ago. Actually, it was President Erdogan who began to change this. There had been previous leaders who would say things like, well, my mother is Kurdish or my grandmother is Kurdish. So there were hints that, you know, some people won't deny their Kurdish heritage. But really, ironically, it was President Erdogan who decriminalized the Kurdish language, who used the word Kurd, who said we need to address Kurdish issues and the Kurdish question, and so on. But it was limited. Today, the Kurds in Turkey have seats in parliament. They have official positions as mayors of various cities. Unfortunately, some of those officials and elected officials have been imprisoned. So the situation is volatile and tense, I think would be a fair description. Our relationship with Turkey is based on trade and is a good relationship. We strive to have good relationships in Iraqi Kurdistan with all of our neighbors. Kurdistan borders, Iraqi Kurdistan I should say, borders with Turkey, Iran and Syria. We have to have good relations with those countries. So, luckily with Turkey we have an energy agreement, a strategic energy agreement. We export oil from Kurdistan through Turkey to the Mediterranean and to the international market. We plan to develop our gas industry, and Turkey hopefully will also be involved in that in some way. But we also are concerned about what happens to our fellow Kurds, our brethren, that they really are connected to us by blood and culture and history. We are concerned about what happens to them in all of our neighboring countries. The question about how does the US juggle the relationship with Turkey and with the Kurds, that's really, to be honest, a question for Secretary Pompeo or the State Department in general. But I would say that perhaps because we in Iraqi Kurdistan have a good relationship with Ankara, that maybe eases some of the dilemma that is there. Also, of course, the US has a very good relationship with the PYD in Syria, the Kurdish fighters in Syria who have been very successfully and bravely defeating ISIS, and the US relies on them. So I think the US does have to juggle that relationship, but hopefully all of us bring something to the table.
Thank you. We won't have time for every question asked today, and I know that you need to be leaving by about 1:30, but I'm sure after we've concluded, certainly come up and speak directly with Ms. Rahman, that'll be fine. This just requires a short answer, and then I'll have one final question. Given your experience with the positive impact of U.S. intervention, I'm going to check out your political antenna here, what is your opinion of the current U.S. approach in its foreign relations? If you care to comment.
Well, you know, we, like other countries and other governments, want to have a good relationship with the United States. In terms of fighting ISIS, and ISIS remains a threat, not on the scale of a few years ago, but it is still an active threat in Iraq and of course in Syria. The assistance, the support from the US regarding ISIS has not changed. There are still 5,000 or so US military in Iraq, and there are other coalition members with military in Iraq. They continue to train and equip Iraqi and Kurdish security forces. So in that sense, it hasn't changed. We know that President Trump doesn't want wars to go on forever. Well, neither do we. I mean, we're the victims, and we're in the center of those wars that we didn't start. So we would love to see an Iraq and the Middle East that is stable, prosperous. But so far, I would say there's probably more continuity than people would imagine.
Okay, finally, and you can certainly take this into in any way, make your final observations or thoughts to be expressed, but the big question in the room perhaps might be, do you think there will ever be a united Kurdistan with Kurds from Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran in it? And if so, what would be the path?
Well, we had a referendum just in Iraqi Kurdistan in 2017, and there was an allergic reaction from everyone to that. So I don't know how we could achieve one united greater Kurdistan. Every Kurd dreams of that. Many of us have relatives who, because of the borders, are now Syrian. I'm Iraqi, my cousin is Syrian, and my other cousin is Turkish. My husband is Iranian, he's a Kurd from Iran. So we all dream of one greater united Kurdistan, but we're also very realistic. Even having a referendum in one part of Kurdistan that was not going to result in an immediate declaration of independence resulted in a very violent confrontation with us. But I think the Kurds are a force that can no longer be denied in the Middle East. We are a force for stability. If you look at Iraq, the Kurdish area of Iraq has been the most stable and prosperous and safe throughout since 2003. Even when ISIS was on our border, even when Baghdad was attacking us after the referendum, Kurdistan region remains stable and secure. We bring that stability to the rest of Iraq, and we can even improve on that now that we have a good relationship with Baghdad. The Kurdish vote. The Kurdish vote can't be ignored anymore in any Turkish election. When the mayor of Istanbul is elected, the Kurdish vote in Istanbul makes a difference. When there are general elections in Turkey, the Kurdish vote makes a difference. In Syria, who is partnering with the US to defeat ISIS? It's the Kurds. And in Iran, as I said, there are 10 or 12 million Kurds. So it's not the same situation as, say, the 1960s or 70s. Today, the Kurds are larger in number. Today, we have a voice internationally. Even if we don't have representatives abroad, we have mobile phones, right? That's pretty powerful. That has really empowered people. So I think we need to really, before thinking about a greater Kurdistan, we need to empower ourselves and organize ourselves within each country. And I would argue that Kurdistan region is a good model. It's not the only model, but it's a good model. We have a parliament, we have a president, we play a positive role in Baghdad, in the federal government, as well as in our own region. And we try to help Iraq to be more democratic, to be more federal, and to be more connected with the international community. And so by doing that and by reforming our own shortcomings, and that's why we're excited about this new cabinet that we have in Kurdistan, to digitize, to catch up with the world in terms of technology, to reform and destroy or defeat corruption, which is really a terrible disease, then that's what our people want first and foremost. Like you, people in Kurdistan want security in their jobs. They want to be sure that when their kids go to school, they'll come home safely. That's what we should first and foremost strive for our population, while also making sure that the Kurdish voice is always heard. Thank you very, very much.
Yes, thank you so much for your incredibly wonderful talk. And this is a token of our appreciation for coming and sharing your story, and you're a wonderful advocate for your homeland. Thank you.